into a blubbering idiot, you're not going to really help anyone very much. But I think, some tears or some show of emotion is not weakness. It's not, it doesn't interfere with your ability to help them. To me, I think it's just being real.
Before I ask Cera the next question, I want to say, as a coach, we don't usually call people blubbering idiots, but
in the military we do.
We'll give Dr. Roger a pass because of his military experience and as the host of the show. So, I'd like to talk a little bit about the value of listening. A couple of statistics. We spend 80% of our waking day communicating. 45% of that is listening to other people. And you know what? We only retain about 25% of that conversation. Some of it is because we're simply hardwired for safety reasons. It's in our DNA to pick out the important stuff and we discard the rest. And some of it is we're just distracted, as Roger, as you would say, our monkey mind. The scary thing is we forget nearly 50% of what we've heard in about 8 hours. So my question for you, Cera, is how to be a good listener. How would you advise people, and how can they retain the important stuff?
That's a good question. I think everybody's memories work a little bit differently in the nuance at the nuance level. But most of us, what we do is we connect things in our minds, right? And those of us who are connectors do that even more. But we connect them to things that we remember. So something from our past. So if we're listening to a story, we're connecting all the time. How does that relate to me? And I think that is one way that we enhance our memory. And so noticing, if you're doing that.
So Cera, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. So, and you too, Danielle, the basic tenet of coaching or of effective communication is asking open-ended questions. What does that mean? Well, give me some examples, or what are you trying to do when you say open-ended questions?
So open-ended at its most simplest form means that you can't answer yes or no to it. That's the most basic definition. But it usually begins with who or what, or we try to avoid why in the coaching world, because why can often make people feel like they're put on the spot, or that there's some judgment behind it. Yeah. What would you add, Danielle?
That was a great definition. I would say when you ask those questions, I just have some examples. So, for example, what do you want most for yourself at this time in your life? In what way are your values in line with your current goals, or how are they not aligned? And that comes into play when you're around people or in situations or sometimes work where there's something questionable ethically and you just feel wrong about it. So checking in with your values. And then for the person talking to a resident, how can I support you in moving forward with this? What do you need from me? Or what makes this pursuit meaningful to you?
Masterpiece is driven by data and powered by content. Maximizing healthy longevity is achievable at all times with the right metrics and content, enabling informed decisions. Powered by Masterpiece can support your community in the critical areas of focus that drive healthy longevity for your residents, staff, and community. Learn more at mymasterpieceliving.com.
When I've heard frequently both of you say is someone may say, well, I want this, or if only this were the case, or whatever. And your response is, well, what would that look like?
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, yeah, and that makes them go deeper as to what this is and why do you want it and what do you expect to happen?
And it's funny that you used what does that look like? Because for an HSAP or sensitive person, I would say, what does that feel like? So depending on who I'm talking to will be the difference where I say, how do you picture it or how do you feel it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a real beauty of open-ended questions is they make people think outside of the box. You get outside of your normal thinking pattern, and they're curiosity questions. And you may or may not know this, but the sound that comes with curiosity that literally changes the brain patterns or what's going on in your mind is which we do naturally. We're like, I wonder, but that is the wonder question. So if I ask somebody a coaching question and they're like, they want to say, I don't know, I will say to them, we'll just wonder about it a little bit. And it does the job every time. It just opens up that space.
That's playing someone not that wants silence in your favor to get them to speak,
Yes.
So that you do that. Nice. Very nice.
With your child, think of children. Children are so curious. They wonder and wonder and wonder until adults say, oh, just stop wondering and do it. And we almost get it educated out of ourselves. So give yourself permission to kind of have that childlike questioning and curiosity.
Yes, absolutely. That's so true. And I think the other thing that it does really is it moves your conscious brain out of the way for a second so that your subconscious brain, which is really so much smarter, can peek through and give you like a little nugget.
All right. So I've learned some things here. I've learned about highly sensitive people. And that can be a challenge. And that's probably one of the most difficult challenges. But communicating with anyone, I should listen more. I should ask these open-ended questions. If I shouldn't be afraid to show emotion short of blubbering idiot. No, because that's communicating. And that I've got a lot more to learn, as we all do probably, about communication. But I think if we're authentic about it and we truly want to hear what they have to say and feel what they're feeling, that's probably the entrance ticket to get some effective communication.
And as you know,
how did
Roger,
I do?
Great. That was perfect. As you know, Roger, it all comes back to mindfulness, right? I mean, you can't be a good listener if you're not present. And when you're working in an industry where there's a million things to do and tons of people to serve, and you love that, but you still have a lot of stress on your shoulders of things to get done, it can be really hard to pause, not multitask, and be present. But when you can do that, that's when those relationships flourish and those connections get made, because emotions really do connect us. So if you have that emotional moment with a resident or with a fellow team member, you're building relationships right there. So you could look at it as a positive thing rather than a challenge.
Oh, sure. Well, I know that you both agree with this, but I'm reminded of the movie City Slickers. Remember City Slickers?
I do.
And
Billy
Curly,
Crystal.
the old grizzled guy, says the one thing that matters in life. And the city cowboy says, well, what is that? He says, only you can really know. But as far as I'm concerned, it's mindfulness, for me personally. But I think really, I don't want to tell everybody what the one thing is, but I think that is the entrance to maybe further on more defined one thing, but you're not going to get there without mindfulness.
Yep. Yeah.
And you know what happens when you're mindful? Not only are you setting aside distractions, but it's really hard to be judgmental when you're being present for someone. Because if you're mindful, you're not thinking, I disagree with what they just said, and here's all the facts to support why they're wrong. If you put that aside, you're going to be less judgmental and less likely to lead people, say, to your conclusion, I would think. So I have one more question for Cera, because Cera, you've worked within organizations more than I have. I'm curious about how, when somebody comes for support, people say that they want to provide resources and tools to support that person without giving advice. coaches, we're not giving advice. We're just letting them come to their own conclusions. So how did you work that balance?
Yeah, I would usually listen, of course, to what they were saying. And then I would ask them that magic question that Roger said earlier too. Well, what does that look like? And what do you see my role in it being? And then they might say like, well, you're going to do it. You're going to make it happen. Right. Like, and I'm like, well, I definitely would love to be a part of it. But I'll need your support with it. So like, let's be a team. Let's figure it out together and have a conversation about, who can do what and how many people we need to support it. And that's like, if you're talking about planning an activity or an event, something like that. But I think it's the same method for even if it's something happening in their personal life. Most of the time, people really just want someone to listen. They really need someone to listen. And the power in hearing your words out loud is something else that we coaches like to focus on. I mean, that is a selling point of coaching. Yes, you're telling us something, and then you have that aha of, oh, community. I've said community 5 times. Maybe that's what I really would like. And as a coach, because we're present and listening, we can point that out and say, well, this is what I've noticed you saying, what do you think about exploring that? So just, I think it's hard when you're a caretaker too. You want to take it on because it feels good. It feels good to take care of other people. And that's also how caretakers get all that burnout that we experience. I'll say that with 3 children. So I use that at home too. When people come to me, when any of my kids or my husband come to me and need my support, I've really learned how to set boundaries, but also be able to make space for actually listening to them, even if that means later. And then working with them as a team. Like, I would love to help you and see you be successful. Like, tell me how we can work together.
Wow. Well, to me, this is like being human 101, and
Yes.
It probably should be the first in college or high school or grammar school or kindergarten, maybe. This is very, very important things. And I think you both said it so well. And wow. This one's going to be a good one to listen to again and again. So you don't make the same mistakes that you've made in the past and not communicating.
Can I add just one thing to something Cera said? Because that was like the first thing I learned in coaching, because I wanted to fix everybody. And when after they gave me all the information, I wanted to say, here's what you need to do. And I stopped myself and they're waiting for me to offer some gem. Yeah. And the only thing I could think of is, how can I support you? What do you need from me? And it made them think, and they said, well, what would be helpful to me is if you mentioned a resource over here. Can you send me that website so I can research or something? So thank you for bringing that up, Cera, because as helpers, we want to help, but it's really hard for us to not help. And
there's nothing saying that we shouldn't, it's just, those boundaries around how much of it we take. But if I have a resource with my clients, I just ask for permission from them. I'm like, hey, I do have an idea. Would you be interested in hearing what it is? And not like 90% of the time, they're like, yeah, definitely.
Well, put yourself in my situation as a physician. They came to me to get fixed.
Yes.
And so if I don't do that, well, that was a little more difficult.
You were ahead of your time, Doc Roger. Because
yes, I was.
I've been going out in nature and meditating, and they're like, well, can't I just get a pill? Is there a pill?
You got to think like a physical therapist, most of the work is outside of the office here. Most of it's outside.
Yeah. Calling me Dr. Woo Woo, go out in nature, and yet, wow, what therapy, as you said, and so much else, just being present.
So we talked about such great stuff today that could apply to anyone in any coaching situation. But just to kind of recap, if you're using it in senior living, some of the key takeaways include holding the space for someone. It's okay if they're feeling emotion, you can sit with that. You can sit in silence, and silence is okay. you can ask those open-ended, powerful questions like, what do you want for yourself and how can I support you?